I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a brand new guest out. He is a young guy, but a huge thinker, big thinker. He is the president of his own company. He's the president of Wealth Research Group. His website is wealthresearchgroup.com. I'm talking about Lior Gantz. Lior, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you, Greg. I'm very excited to be here.
Very good to have you. I know, as I said in the pre-interview, you're a big thinker. I mean, you, for such a young guy with, you've been investing in stocks and looking for investments, according to your bio, since you were 16 years old. I just want to, and you've been a favorite guest on several big internet channels, and I'm happy to have you on. You were a guest on X22 on the night of the Trump election, Trump win, I should say, Trump victory. And you say with Donald Trump, let's just start there, there are good things and bad things that he can do for the economy. Let's start with some of the bad things that he can do for the economy that may be, unintended consequence. I like Trump, just so people know, they're far better than his opponent, but he's got a very sticky wicket. I mean, things can blow up if he zigs when he should zag, right?
Sure. Look, obviously, Trump was the better choice. There's not even a comparison because the other candidate was let's just say bordering the criminal. With regards to Trump and what he can do for the U.S. economy, he is inheriting a very rough situation. The national debt is reaching $20 trillion. You've got 80 million people that are reaching retirement and are getting out of the workforce. So tax receipts might subside. Manufacturing is at the lowest it's been since the 1940s. There's so many problems that he has to face. He just has to shut down fires, and he has to do it in the way that he knows that that his experience of the last 70 something years that he's been around has proven to be right, and he's using his advisor, etc. And he's pushing hard on trade, and that is something that can definitely backfire on him. Just so you understand, Greg, when you rearrange all the trade agreements that the world's largest economy, bar none, has built up for decades, it's a problem. And what can happen is with the fact that 71% of the global currency system is made up of dollars, and 50% of those are outside the U.S., a lot of foreign governments sensing trade agreements, sensing changes, will send back those dollars into the U.S. banking system, and that could cause a rough time for the entire system, and it would cause a lot of inflation within the U.S. That is something that has not happened since 1971. Just remember this. This entire monetary system is built on the fact that the U.S. has the reserve currency of the world, and they've been able to basically, what does the U.S. export? It exports inflation. It just exports all of the dollars it creates and should stay within the U.S. system. They just export it out, and they buy back products, oil, agriculture, products for consumer. 71% of the U.S. economy is based on services. So they export inflation, they export fiat currency, and get back tangible assets. Now that scenario is only possible because, one, there's no other real alternative right now for a reserve currency, unfortunately, and two, because this is the way that the global economy is built right now. And so if he changes that, he changes the equation, it could create a lot of inflation in the U.S. U.S. banks are so liquid anyways, they have so much excess cash because of TAR programs and the QE programs that this can prompt them to start lending and lend to the wrong people, and it can prompt the government to start issuing increased food stamps and universal unemployment checks, all kinds of stuff that can create large inflation processes in the U.S. So that is one side that is problematic. The other side of this is very spectacular for the U.S. economy because Trump is is doing a lot of things that should have been done years ago, decades ago even. Deregulation, cutting back taxes, cutting the red tape, and just making sure that businesses feel more comfortable with opening up new branches in the U.S. The greatest indicator of this is the Russell 2000. The small cap index is up much more than the large cap index since his election. That's because the small cap companies are mostly based in the U.S., whereas the large cap companies are international. I hope that answers your question. I just gotta make sure that I tell you the Trump rally, this experience that we're seeing right now, is not only because of Donald Trump. There's a lot of other factors that come into play here.
When you talk about all these dollars coming back, I mean, John Williams says there's at least 16 trillion liquid U.S. dollar assets held outside the country, and they could be coming home and start inflation. Do you think no matter what, I mean, if Trump is successful, he's going to get inflation? Is that right? I mean, is that a speculation, or is that going to be a dead solid, edict of the Trump administration? They're going to shoot for inflation, are they not?
Sure. There's two converging forces right now with regards to inflation and deflation. And what listeners must understand is this: 85% of the currency issuance on our planet is by us, the private sector. We go to the bank and we take out a mortgage or a student loan or a car loan, you name it, credit card debts. That's 85% of circulated currency. And therefore, because since the year 2000 until 2008, the consumers, which are mostly peak earners, have subsided every year. And every year there's more people retiring out of the workforce and earning less in the U.S. because of the baby boomer phenomenon. What happened was the economy wasn't as liquid as it was between the years that the baby boomers were rising in assets, rising in income, taking out more debts, which is 1980 until 2000, the greatest bull market in the stock market history. So between the year 2000 and 2008, when they start to close down debt levels and liquidate assets and become more frugal and wait for retirement, the amount of currency in circulation deflated, and that's how you got 2008. And so what the Fed is doing is through QE programs and all these other stimulating measures, it's trying to offset that fact
I got it. Yes.
You see, but they only are in charge of 15% of the currency, and that's why, Greg, even though people have since 2008 screamed inflation, we haven't seen hyperinflation or any wild inflations, and that's because the Fed can only control roughly about 15% of the currency issuance. Now, if this trend keeps on continuing, where boomers are and not only boomers, but people are not taking on new debt, corporations are afraid of new debt, that's going to create a lot of deflationary effect, even though the Fed can continue stimulating the economy. Now, the private sector is starting to feel good right now because of Trump. And that's why the private sector is starting to lend again, to borrow again, and the banks, which are getting higher interest rates because the Fed is starting to raise interest rates, the banks have more incentive now to borrow money out, right? Because they're earning higher returns on their loans. And that's why inflation could certainly happen in the U.S. because of what's going on. The other thing that is important to understand is, for the first time since the year 2000, the demographic group of earners between 35 and 49-year-olds has trumped in numbers the age group of 20 to 34-year-olds. That's very important. Throughout U.S. history, anytime that has happened, GDP growth has been incredible, and there's been a boost to the economy, and businesses have flourished, companies have flourished, things have gone higher, inflation has raged higher. Now, you got to realize with me what I'm saying. Some companies in the U.S., some businesses are phenomenal businesses, and they have a great future ahead of them, and they're multinational companies. They make amazing products, etc. It is not the private sector that is the problem. It is the government. The government is, unfortunately, we all transact in a national currency, or the measuring sticks of anything we buy is the U.S. dollar, and we are not in charge of that as the complete rules of that. That is something that the Federal Reserve system of banks and commercial banks, the fractional reserve lending system, is in charge of, and therefore they can mismanage that system even when businesses do flourish and create hyperinflation. I've seen it happen in other countries in the 80s and 90s, where the economy was fine. The government was mismanaging fiat currencies because they haven't dealt with fiat currencies ever before. Before 1971, there was no such thing as a non-backed currency by anything. And so we've seen countries where everything was fine, unemployment was low, people were going to work, and they had to come up with all kinds of alternatives for their own currencies because of the government. So there's a real grave danger that the government itself or the elite banking system will create problems. And I would even say, and I'm saying this with qualification, they might even want to make Trump fail. They might even do something to his disadvantage on purpose, because he's not mainstream, because he's not them. He came out of he was not backed like Hillary. So that is also baked in the cake. That is what we call black swan, right?
Do you think that that we'll get more inflation than deflation? Do you think when push comes to shove, they'll trip the inflation button? And do you think that's
They will. They will. No doubt. They will not let deflation happen in the U.S. And I'll tell you why, Greg. It's because they feel like they're invincible, and they feel like like they can admit to failure. They will never admit, hey, we've done this wrong, QE programs was wrong, a negative interest rate was wrong. They will not come out and say it. They will just do whatever it takes to play their end game, because honestly, they really don't care about the average person. It's the last thing on their mind. They care about their lifestyle and the way that they live life, and on the expense of the toil, sweat, and energy of the people who really create the economy and innovation and products and things that they can never understand, because all they do is play money games. Yeah.
Do you think that I like to ask this question to people, and it seems like you're a big thinker and you may know this. With the rising interest rates, and they have 13-14 trillion in negative interest rates in Europe, with these rising interest rates, could they blow up the derivative market? Could that blow up? Could that be one of the things either that happens, or that the elite use against Trump and just blow up the bond market? I mean, we have all of this. We grew the global debt to 230 trillion. We grew it about 70 trillion since '08, and so we just added more coal to the fire. Could they blow up the global derivative market, the bond market, either on purpose or by accident?
But before answering that, I just want to tell you this. With regards to negative interest rates, I want people to understand why they did it and why it failed and what people should do about it. I think that's important to give actionable advice. So the reason they did it was because they thought that people would go out and borrow new currency. Like I told you, there's been a deflating currency system for the private sector. People are afraid to borrow. So lowering interest rate is supposed to get you to stimulated and borrow. What it does is the other way. So let's say you're 50 or 55 and you've accumulated $1 million, and now you're going to retire in 10 years, and what you're thinking is, hey, I'm going to live from 65, let's say, till 85. I got 20 years left. I have $1 million in savings, and I'm going to put it in bonds for 5%. I'm going to get $50,000 per year, and it's going to sustain a good quality of living. And I'm probably going to liquidate some assets, some real estate holdings that I have. I'm going to live a great retirement. Now that is gone. That is $50,000 that you thought were coming in every year that are gone. Times that by 20 years, that's $1 million lost right there. so evaporated just because of what they did. So what are you doing? Are you 55? You have $1 million. What are you going to do? You're going to borrow? No, you're gonna save up another million because you know that that million that you thought was coming is not coming. So people save up instead of borrow, and that's why it doesn't work.
Ah, it had the exact opposite effect. It created more deflation,
Sure,
not inflation,
definitely,
not people
definitely,
borrowing money. People got freaked out and started saving even more. So it had
correct.
they absolutely backfired in their faces.
It absolutely did, and that's why they you can't create you can't lower it forever. So it's definitely a failure. Um, and what I'd like to say is with Wealth Research Group, what we've done is if you go to our website on the top menu, there's a tab called Wealth Stocks, and one of the reports there is about 8% yield stocks, and that is a very important group of select few companies that can really help people with current income towards retirement. I mean, it's very important to understand you don't need to be a victim of the system. There's one thing to talk about it, but you gotta zig when it zags, right? You gotta make sure that your retirement it's your life. You can't give them the pleasure or even the control over your life. So there's definitely solutions out there. We, especially for your show, we put together a comprehensive report about 2 companies that yield over 8%.
And this is free.
Yes, it's everything on our website is free, and I'll tell you what, it's a rich plethora of information. Like I told you, on the top tab, on the top menu, the tab there it says Wealth Stocks. There's beautiful downloads there to check out, and the one next to it says Special Reports. It's filled with information about timeless principles of investing success, about the natural resource sector with gold, silver, zinc.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in just a minute. Though.
Sure.
I want to wrap up on negative interest rates. So could they blow up could the system blow up with all this funny money, all this debt in the system, given the fact we have this huge overhang of derivatives in the world?
Here's the thing, Rick. Deutsche Bank just admitted and settled a $38 million lawsuit because of price rigging in the silver market. You're aware of that, right?
Yes, I am. And gold, too.
Sure. So in order to lessen their settlement agreement, they've agreed to dish out information about other banks.
Yeah, I know. That to me is just music to my ears. You know, I think Scotia Bank got fingered, and also HSBC, and who knows what else. So,
sure, Barclays,
Bank of Nova Scotia.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Look, and here's what I think. These banks all have a vested interest in filling their own pockets. Once one of them, begins to change the way that they look at derivatives and start using derivatives as a weapon against the common man, they're going to fight between each other as well. These are nasty people that all they care about is the end of the day what they made in cold hard cash to take home. So they really could start a derivative war, which would be it wouldn't be beneficial for anyone, and it will be even more violent than what you are proposing, which is an orchestrated derivative explosion, which I really don't think is possible just because of human nature. These people are so greedy, they're just going to try and bank off of this like they do of everything else. But I do think it's so big now, the derivative market, it's out of the control of anybody. There's no institution on the planet that can really control what's going on. Just because it's derivatives, right? It's derived out of so many products that nobody can keep track of.
So Jim Rickards has said in the past, and I'm going to get you on because you're a big thinker. You're a young guy. I mean, I'm looking at you thinking, if I just close my eyes, I think I'm talking to a 70-year-old, and I look at you and you're like a 30-year-old. So it's good. That's not a cut to you. That's just a compliment to your brain. So Jim Rickards has said that that we're going to have a system shutdown at some point because the derivatives, the debt, the whole thing is just way too unruly. Do you fear some sort of a shutdown, a reset to the system? Christine Lagarde at the IMF been talking about it. Other people have been talking about it too. Do you fear a system shutdown, a derivative, on purpose or otherwise?
Why not? Well, What's the alternative? I mean, the fiat monetary system is built on debt and credit. You've got to resolve that issue at some point. If it's not forced upon you, you gotta do it at some point.
And you think it's going to happen?
It's there's either going to be hyperinflation, which just creates evaporates the debt and restructures everything. A default, which is something I told you that I don't believe will happen because they will never admit to defaulting. No government, no large government will admit to defaulting. Let's say the U.S. says they're going to default. There's $2 trillion of U.S. Money in China. There's going to be a world war about that kind of thing. So defaults are out of the question. They're not going to admit it. They rather hyperinflate the currency if they can. Definitely a new system will come into play. It will need at some point there will need to be a global discussion between politicians, bankers, whoever is in the think tanks of these elite groups, and hopefully we can influence the system enough by doing interviews like this and just by making sure we educate our fellows and our children and everybody else, so that the next system that comes along will be more beneficial. Personally, again, we don't want to be a victim, right? And so what you want to do is you want to set your life and your portfolio and your finances to where this affects you at the bare minimum. So what I personally have an emergency fund, which is cash outside the system or cash equivalents outside the system for 12 months. No matter what happens, I have 12 months of living expenses set aside. On top of that, I have about 5 to 10% of my savings at all times in physical bullion and coins, gold and silver. The reason is simple. Gold and silver are catastrophe hedges. They're insurance. The measure, if you have savings, just savings, not assets, not real estate assets, not stocks or anything like that. If you just have U.S. currency or other currencies sitting in a bank account, that the only value it has is fiat value, meaning that other people are obligated to take it, and that's what provides it value. And the tax receipts are sufficient so that the U.S. government can meet its interest obligations. That's the only thing that gives any fiat currency true value. And so you cannot not have currency, obviously, because you won't be able to live your life comfortably where everybody else has it. And so at least 5 to 10% of your savings has to be in gold and silver. Some people want more. That's fine. I rather put a lot of money into assets that are cash flow producing, because that grows my wealth and not just preserves my wealth, if that makes sense. And so emergency fund, physical bullion, high yield stocks, like I told you before, to provide income. And then I think a very wise idea is to speculate and invest in the natural resource sector if you know what you're doing, because the gains can be absolutely ridiculously good. And obviously we're a big believer in companies that can just be profitable year over year, even during the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. Some companies have beat the S&P 500 by even double. And they continue to do so. That's also right there on the website as well, like I said.
Now, Lior, you said in the pre-interview that gold is something that can go up during rising interest rates. So you were saying that it's not necessarily true that rising interest rates will crush gold. Can you explain that quickly? And that you're also a proponent of holding gold, as you just said. So can you explain why rising interest rates will not crush gold?
Sure. I'll answer the question and divide it into three. First of all, history tells us that the direct correlation, is not gold to inflation rates. Inflation rates and gold, they correlate, but not directly. What gold really correlates with is real interest rates, meaning bond yields minus inflation. If that is close to negative or zero, then gold flourishes, thrives. So All you need to do is look at the past 46 years of fiat monetary system since Nixon closed the gold window and basically made us live under this system. Between 1972, 1974, 1977, and 1980, and 2004, 2006, the Fed went on tightening periods where they increased interest rates. Each time that has happened, gold is absolutely exploded higher and stocks suffered. The reason is, for stocks, it's simple. Interest rates are like weights on stock value prices. The minute you raise interest rates, stock valuations goes down because people deem stocks as risky, and they rather put more money into bonds. Now, gold flourishes in these environments, and you remember because you were there. 1977, 1980, inflation was high, interest rates were high, and gold was absolutely exploding. And this is the true correlation, and this is what people need to remember. And that's why this is a golden nugget for you. The second interest rate hike, which is just what we experience, is really the trigger for gold going much higher. So I would expect a very favorable year for gold. Wealth Research Group was founded at the beginning of 2016. Between 2011 and 2015, I was managing money for high-end clients, and I didn't want to touch the resource sector. It was such a brutal bear market. But at the end of 2015, me and my partners were taking a look at it for the millionth time, and we finally said this is as close to the bottom as it comes, and people need to understand how to position and profit from probably what would be the greatest bull market for resources in history, because the bear market was so brutal.
So what's coming up is the biggest bull market in resources, which includes gold, oil, silver, lumber, you name it, cattle. So the biggest bull market in resources is coming up.
Well, let me qualify that. This is not going to affect all resources in the same way. For instance, you mentioned oil. The way you extract oil from the ground has advanced so much technologically that it's light years ahead of what happens in gold and silver mining. Gold and silver mining are at lows that have not been seen for 20 years. There's rarely a mega discovery. With regards to oil, people find all kinds of ways to extract new oil, natural gas, etc. There's no problem doing that.
So the
finding
bull market,
gold and silver.
So the bull market you see is going to be in gold and silver.
Well, it's definitely gonna be very favorable to gold and silver. Silver is very unique, not only because it's an industrial metal, and so much of it is consumed and gone. That's it. You can never recycle it again. It's lost. And so it's different from gold in that regard. It's much rare. It's much more rare if governments reinstitute silver as a monetary unit. It will be a rush to silver that will reprice it, and the price discovery can be insane. It's one of the only commodities, Greg, that has not surpassed its 1980 high. How many world records do you know that have lasted for 37 years? It's time for silver to go above $50 per ounce for sure. Zinc is insanely bullish. Wealth Research Group on the first quarter of 2017, we're going to feature two zinc companies that we feel will be absolutely the best performing zinc companies on the planet, bar none. And obviously, it's a free membership if we haven't said so before. Zinc incredibly bullish because zinc is in a wild supply deficit. There's been two major shutdowns of mines in 2016, and if you take a look at the best performing metals of 2016, zinc is number 2. It's very bullish, very very bullish. Cobalt, interesting, very interesting, because even if they find new supply of cobalt, they will find new uses for it. It's one of those futuristic metals that everyone should pay attention to and allocate some funds into one one great stock at least in cobalt, and we're going to feature a full report on one company that we found out of 134 companies that we looked at in the cobalt sector in the next week through our newsletter, which is, as I said, is free. Anyways, Greg, there's so many things to look.
But let's just go back to gold just for a second here. So you're bullish on the gold. You said silver would go over 50. You're saying that gold is going to go over $1,900 an ounce. You just feel even in a rising interest rate environment, they're going to press the inflation button and gold is going to go up, not because of inflation, because it'll be behind the real interest rate relative to inflation, like it was. And a good example of that, we had actual lowering gold prices when Paul Volcker came in and raised rates to like 20%.
Sure.
And that was a time when gold did go down, but you're saying that's not going to happen. Gold's going to go
up. Listen, here's how you should look at it. The price of gold and silver is one thing to look at, but the purchasing power of gold and silver is more important to look at. So even if prices stay the same, $1,200, $1,300, $20, $25 per ounce for silver, what you got to realize, if this happens while other assets are losing price, you're gaining in wealth, and you're repricing your portfolio to where you can buy more with your bullion when you exchange it into cash producing assets, or if you just don't touch it, you're still getting a lot richer than the other people who are not holding it. That's in a deflationary environment. In an inflationary environment, gold and silver prices will definitely rise higher, and mining stocks have such a leverage to gold prices as assets, right? Because they're dynamic. They can merge with other companies. They can buy more assets. They can discover new deposits. That's what makes those vehicles the perfect way to blend between preservation of wealth with physical bullion and creating. Well, I would look in 2016. We've profiled 4 companies that have gone over 400%, 3 companies that have gone over 300%. And 2 companies that have doubled out of 12 stocks that we featured. So there's an immense potential with the right mining shares. It just takes so much work to figure this out, and that's why we had to look at 758 companies in 2016 to find these 12. But look, the way I see it, there's an insane potential in the resource sector. And some minerals will do a lot better than others, but it's definitely something that is worth exposure. Even Ray Dalio, the greatest fund manager in history, with his Bridgewater Associates hedge fund, which oversees so much money, it's insane. He has a 50% allocation, 15% into commodities, because he knows, obviously better than anyone, that it's explosive, and he's famous for saying that if you don't own gold, then you just don't know history.
Go ahead.
That's it.
If you don't own gold, you don't know history. Lior Gantz, we will close right there. You are the president of wealthresearchgroup.com. It's a new group. Right. Only been out a year. You're a wealth manager. You are a financial expert, a stock guru, a gold expert. You're a lot of experts in a very young body, a young look. But Lior, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you. I had a privilege.